Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. For come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And welcome to the final regular season preview, I should say, for the football team. Hopefully, it's not the last preview overall of the season, but it is the last regular season preview. That is the senior day matchup up against the Colorado Buffaloes. And, full disclosure, coming off of a heartbreaker last week, it's tough. It's tough to sort of wake up for these games, and I do mean that in a literal sense because it is an 11 a.m. game. But at least you get to go on with your day no matter the outcome. But just talking about Colorado themselves, they're in the midst of a lost season of their own. Not just a disappointing season, but a lost season. Being 3-8 this year, their only 3 W's being against Delaware, Wyoming, and hilariously enough, Iowa State. And most of the early losses, though, were very narrow ones, so one-score games. And then the wheels completely fell off after Utah, and they have been just nuked from orbit by every other team they have faced other than West Virginia. Although they did keep it close for 3 quarters up against Arizona State before Arizona State woke up and promptly slapped Colorado in that fourth quarter. But I think that this is, the stereotype with certain teams, especially teams that get a lot of hype. And this has always been the case. Even this is not like a Deion Sanders complaint. This is a hype team complaint. Whenever you get to the back end of the season, you're not where you want to be. It's very easy for a team to check out. And I kind of think that's what's happened with Colorado, especially after the Utah game and especially after the news we got today about Juju Lewis.
Yeah, definitely been a tale of kind of 2 halves of the season for them because, they start out, their first 7 games. Not great, 3-4, but you can come back from that. But they've done the exact opposite. From that point on, it, like you said, it's just been man-made horrors beyond comprehension for them. 4 straight losses, all of them blowouts, and one of them to West Virginia, who admittedly has kind of found their footing in the last few weeks. So talking about West Virginia, but yeah, it's been a rough go of it for Colorado. And then throw in their true freshman 5-star Juju Lewis. He is sitting out this last game to preserve his red shirt and presumably transfer. So that limits their options at quarterback, which has been a bit of a revolving door this year with Lewis, Ryan Staub, and Caden Salter, the transfer from Liberty. And frankly, none of them have been very good, but Lewis was probably the least bad of the group, and that's as a true freshman. But yeah, this Colorado team is not in a good way. Although, if you want to look at it in a more positive light for them, other than West Virginia, we're going to be probably the most gettable game on their schedule since their last victory. Which was against Iowa State, which, again, I really don't know how they managed that because this Colorado team, I feel like, should not have matched up very well with Iowa State. But here we are.
It's funny. That's the only thing I really care about is it's funny. And I guess Colorado's offense, spoilers, is designed to beat zone coverage, and Iowa State almost exclusively plays zone coverage. So maybe that's how they got away with it. I don't really know. But now we can talk about their offensive numbers and sort of scheme.
Yeah, so stats-wise, on offense, they're 109th in yards per game, 110th in points per game. They're 88th in third down percentage at 38%. All bad numbers there. But if they're able to get a drive going and sustain it, they're actually pretty decent in the red zone. They're 32nd in the nation, 90% scoring rate, 62% on the touchdowns. However, though, they have only about half of the attempts as some of the schools surrounding them. So maybe some of it is just a small sample size for why they do so well with getting there, or why they do so well in that stat. But it's still one of the few kind of bright spots for them, I guess.
Yeah, and that to me is just sort of the epitome of it. And I think if you just take into account lost yardage from things like sacks or TFLs, I think that gets even worse because this team's also not very good at preventing havoc plays on offense. They have given up 35 sacks on the year, which is more than 3 sacks a game, which stinky bad, really bad, especially against, with the schedule they've played, they should not be giving up that many sacks, especially when they're not coming from the left tackle. Because Jordan Seaton isn't giving up pressure. It's literally all of the other 4. He's doing fine. But no, they're very bad at preventing havoc on the offensive side of the ball. And, they're just generally offensively, I get what they're trying to do. They just don't really have the person under center to operate the offense in the way that they want to.
Yeah. Feel bad for Jordan Seaton being lumped in with the rest of that offensive line. Because really outside of Jordan Seaton, offensive line has been far and away the biggest problem for Colorado the entirety of Deion's tenure. Because they've had one good offensive lineman, and it's Jordan Seaton. So, but moving on here, they're pretty similar to last year's team of Colorado. I mean, in terms of what they want their scheme to be, they want to spread teams out, take advantage of any teams that play zone by putting defenders in conflict. They use a lot of true spread, so 4 wide receivers or 3 receivers in the tight end, and they use short motions to try and force defenses into a zone check. The point of this on offense is to get the ball out quickly and on time, do whatever is necessary to accomplish that. So naturally, this means that there are RPOs littered throughout the offense, as well as more NFL over-the-middle concepts that a lot of people associate with Sean McVay.
Yeah, and here's the downside with them. And you could say what you will about Shedeur Sanders. I've gone on record saying that I thought he was overrated coming out of college. I didn't think he was a 5th-round pick. That was certain. But even he had issues in this offense because he held on to the ball for too long. But that's just because he was waiting for zone openings to show up. Now, that, he couldn't really throw with anticipation. That's what you need to do in that type of offense, so on and so forth. If you thought the offense was inconsistent last year, oh my God. They do not have the quarterback to operate that type of offense. And we'll talk about him later, but that person was not on the roster this season. And you would think that would cause them to adjust to more in the way of, okay, let's try and, try to force man coverage, if anything else. Because I do believe they have the horses to just play straight up man coverage. And they have a running quarterback, and running quarterbacks naturally do better against man coverage. They just didn't. I have no explanation for why. They just didn't.
Yeah. In the passing game, it's been mentioned they really want to get the ball out quick, regardless of whether it's Staub, Lewis, or Salter taking the snaps. Pretty much all of them are throwing within 10 yards of the line on over half of their dropbacks, with that number ballooning up to as much as 75% of their dropbacks if you push it to 20 yards downfield. This also applies to where they target, preferring the middle of the field over anywhere else, though they still will throw outside on slants, goes, and curls, which with the poor quality of offensive line play that they have in front of them, that's a good read on their part. Get the ball out as quickly as possible. We don't want a quarterback sitting in the pocket for too long, or else they're going to get sacked. And that still happens to them quite a bit, even with this schematic focus.
Yeah, and some of that is on the quarterback, and I know I keep mentioning it, but that really is the main issue with this type of offense. Though the other issue is that if you're going to attack over the middle, you probably, and I don't know why I said probably, you do need to establish the running game so that way the linebackers aren't immediately going back into the pass windows. It's a big reason why K-State played so well against Shedeur Sanders last year was they were coming out in just straight up dime defense, and Colorado still could not run the ball against them. Lo and behold, Connor.
Yeah. Their running game really doesn't exist. They cannot run the football to save their life. What they actually try to do is be a zone running team, just because it's very easy to pair zone running with RPOs. But the emphasis there is trying.
Yeah, because if you look at their attempts, their passing attempts versus their rushing attempts, you would think that this is a team that, it wants to try to establish a running game. They have 383 rushing attempts on the year, 333 passing attempts. Then you look at the yardage differential, where in 50 fewer passing plays, there's a 1,000-yard difference between the two, which if you want to be a balanced offense, that's not how that works. That is not how you go about establishing a balanced offense in an offense that wants to attack over the middle. That is quite simply not how that works. And so their scheme really falls apart because of the lack of a truly threatening running game, which, again, that wouldn't have been on my bingo card in an offense with Caden Salter in it, who, if nothing else, has shown an ability to run. That was his entire job at Liberty. But now we can talk about their two, one and a room in terms of notable players.
Yeah. One more thing I'll note on their running game, though, before we get to notable players. As a team, they're averaging 3.5 yards per rush. This has been a very bad year for K-State's run game, and K-State, before the Utah game, was averaging about 4.3 yards per rush. The last time K-State was in that neighborhood of being that bad of a rushing team would have been the 2014 and 2015 teams, which averaged 3.7 and 3.9 yards per rush, respectively. And at least that 2014 team was arguably the best passing team in K-State history with Waters, Lockett, and Sexton. 2015 just wasn't very good, but at least they made a bowl, I guess, which that was the Bazooka Joe year for those who are not remembering. Yeah. So, side tangent done. We can get into their notable offensive players. Caden Salter, likely to be the starter. He's a true running quarterback, transferred in from Liberty. He's been benched on and off throughout the year, and even got put behind a walk-on and Ryan Staub, who was pretty bad but still managed to win a game. So that's really the main takeaway you should have. He's a really poor scheme fit for Colorado's offense because he just doesn't have the arm strength or processing ability to run this kind of NFL pro style deal that Colorado wants to roll with. They want to run the Shedeur offense, and Caden Salter is definitely not Shedeur. He peaked in 23 at Liberty. Last year, he still took a step back, but was still at the very least an effective runner. But this year he really doesn't even have the run game working super well for him. He still has almost 300 yards with kind of spotty play, but only averaging 3.3 per carry, which is down significantly from last year. We averaged 5.1, and down even further from 23, where he averaged 6.7 yards per carry. Like Caden Salter in 23 was an absurd football player. Threw for 2,800 yards, 32 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, rushed for over 1,000 yards at 1,089 and 12 touchdowns. So he had a fantastic year in 23. This is not the same player, and this offense is not tailored to his strengths.
No. Caden Salter, it would not surprise me if Caden Salter was a theoretical backup plan if Utah didn't get Devin Dampier. That is the quarterback with which we are operating with, because he doesn't have good arm strength. In fact, of the teams that we have faced this year, he might. I'm trying to think of any exceptions. Obviously, not counting Army in North Dakota. He may have the weakest arm that we have faced this season, and we just came off of Devin Dampier, who, if nothing else, doesn't really have too much of a deep ball. And then we immediately got proven wrong because there were like 3 deep shots that game because
of course
we're not allowed to be correct.
Yeah. To be fair, he missed a ton in that game too. Like he missed at least 3 or 4 deep shots. But yeah, when he had that like 60-yard completion, I was just sitting there like, why did we say that in the episode? Even though it was true, it's not his strength. Of course, though, it's happening against us.
Yeah, naturally. But the point being is that Caden Salter is probably the worst quarterback to offense pairing that you probably could have ever seen. Outside of, this is going to be a cut, maybe putting Malik Cunningham in like the 1980s Oilers run and shoot offense, or like Hawaii's offense now, since they're the only team that still runs the run and shoot. Because, oh my, that would be horrid.
Yeah, that is a super deep cut. I had no idea where you were going to go with that, and I wouldn't have guessed that in a million years. So proper use of deep cut, I think. But I guess I can take us into kind of the defensive numbers here, unless you had anything else on the offense. Like,
okay. Well, the defense, we have the receiver room.
Oh, I almost forgot. Yeah. All the receivers are basically the same people. They're about 6 foot tall speedsters that separate mostly on talent and are fine enough at finding open holes in zone coverage to sit down in.
Yeah, they're not Sunbelt receivers, because I think
Sunbelt receivers are all like 6'4" or 6'2".
Yeah.
They're tall and can do that. And like they're like professional tossers, like good for like one Sports Center top 10 highlight against every Power 4 team that they see ever. Like we're like running pretty low on like the list of like G5 conferences that like we can schedule, because Sunbelt teams will embarrass our DBs, and we can't have DBs that doubt their skills. And American teams might beat us, like Tulane. So I guess we have the MAC. Mountain West, I suppose.
I mean,
we've got Washington State on the schedule and the Pac-12's G6, I suppose.
What's left of the Pac-12. I will say that Tulane, if John Summerall is not there, I think we stand a considerably better chance. However, knowing the generational heater that Tulane is on in hiring coaches, they may just hire like Sick Nabin or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I was about to say, we felt similarly when Willie Fritz left for Houston, and then they hired something called a John Summerall, and that worked out pretty well for them. So, I don't know, hopefully they miss on this one, like go goose instead of duck, but I don't know, let's see on this one, I guess. But All right, now I think we're done with the offense, and
That is correct.
we can move into the defensive numbers. So defensive, they're pretty poor in some of the main raw stats. 125th in yards per game, 114th in points per game. Very, very bad there. However, they are shockingly good in third down percentage on defense, 40th in the nation, and they hold opponents to 35% conversion. And then with opponent red zone percentages, they are perfectly tied with K-State, 81%, giving them 45th in the nation. And then another noteworthy raw stat here, they are third worst in the country in rushing defense, giving up over 216 yards per game on the ground. For those tracking home, I think that's about 1.3 Joe Jacksons.
Yeah, and I think I have an explanation for why their third down defense is so good, and that's pretty much they play every down like it is a third down. Where third down you think of, quote unquote money down. That's the down you're going to send a lot of blitzes. That's the time you're going to play a lot of man coverage. Basically try to force the offense to make a play. That's just what Colorado does the entire time. And I bring it's brought up later in this scouting report, but that should sound vaguely familiar to a team that K-State has played this season. But I will continue to hide the ball because there is a very, very distinct. There's a very large distinction between the team I'm referring to, and it is in this next bullet point.
All right. The big reveal. Their biggest issue on defense, though, this year. Hey, you were lying. This is not this bullet point.
No. I said that after this bullet point. It is the big distinction between the two teams.
All right. I thought that you were just fabricating things on the podcast and wasn't going to let that fly. Anywho, their biggest issue on defense this year has been a complete inability to generate havoc. They're only averaging a hair over a sack per game and only have 6 interceptions on the year, which is not a winning formula. However, as we've seen with K-State, sometimes the opposite isn't a winning formula either, as K-State's actually generated a fairly decent amount of havoc this year, and it just hasn't worked. So
down to down, I think there's something to be said about down to down consistency. The truth is you should be somewhere in the middle between K-State, who's I think second in the nation in turnovers, and Colorado, who cannot generate any havoc. You have to be somewhere in the continuum there to be efficient.
Yeah, K-State's turnover margin is fantastic. Bill Snyder would be blushing at the numbers that we're putting up in turnover margin, and then he'd see our record and be like, how did this happen? I thought I escaped 2015. But
yeah. And now the big reveal. Guess now on your phones who schematically the Colorado defense, I should say, is most similar to that K-State has played this year. Guess now on your phones. You don't really have to, because Connor's going to tell you.
Yeah, so curious if we can get a good faith guess correctly on this, but schematically on defense, they do pretty much the same things that Utah does. They major in single high coverage. They want to play a lot of man coverage, and they blitz a lot. The problem, though, is that they have nowhere near the same amount of discipline and unit cohesion that Utah does. And they also don't have what Utah has, which is a perennial second round pick, a free safety, just kind of rotating in and out. So they are in theory and on paper doing what Utah is doing, but in practice could not be further from what they're doing, at least in terms of their results.
Yeah, and this is where I think the distinction between scheme and players, like you could have the exact same scheme, and if you sub out like literally a linebacker into a scheme, that completely changes how that ends up operating, and that's with a single player. So Colorado does not have a Teo Johnson. They just quite simply do not have that on their team. And I think it's actually Tao Johnson. I keep doing Teo like there's an apostrophe. I don't think there. I know there's not an apostrophe, but I also just pronunciation is weird sometimes.
Well, we can check the media guide. I think I've been saying it wrong too. So I should have checked the guide.
Well, I will continue on this little mini rant. And what Utah is their strength is not only playing man coverage, but having a quick trigger on how they collapse down on the running game. And that's why the counter game and the power game worked so well for K-State up against Utah. I'm not going to hide the ball from you. Theoretically, if we came out with the same game plan against Colorado that we had against Utah, we should get similar results. Knowing K-State and knowing the human element of it, I don't know.
Turns out it is Teo. Referencing page 19 of the 2025 Utah Utes football media guide, Your Honor. So,
okay. So my first instinct was correct.
It was.
But the point still stands. Colorado wants to be Utah on defense. They quite simply are not Utah on defense.
No, they are not. They still do have a notable player, though, on defense. That is their true number one corner in DJ McKinney. He's a sticky player that can find himself in some day two NFL draft conversation because of how great he is in man coverage against some really good number one receivers that he's faced. So it's a reminder that even though this defense as a whole unit hasn't been great, there's still a lot of individual talent.
Yeah. And I've said this analogy before. You can have all the pieces to a symphony and not be able to make them sound good together. You can have all the talent in the world, but if they don't know how to play together and operate within a cohesive scheme, it's almost not going to matter, and everything is going to be less than the sum of its parts. And honestly, I don't think that the trench talent at Colorado is that good on the defensive side of the ball anyway, and that's including the linebackers. I think their linebackers are just okay. And, I mean, the true strength of the team is their defensive backfield, which who could have possibly guessed that Deion Sanders could recruit defensive backs? Who could have predicted this? But their strength is their defensive backs. They're going to play a ton of man coverage. But as we learned against Utah, when they're playing man coverage, those extra defenders, they're going to have their backs to the ball. They're not paying attention. Zone coverage, everyone's looking at the quarterback, and that's why zone coverage is so much better against the run. In man coverage, you're at least taking three people out of the play just because of, turning their backs to coverage. Three is an exaggeration. At minimum two in the outside corners, who you can make an argument are sometimes a non-factor in the running game anyway. That's not the point. But yeah, this Colorado defense just is not very good, I think is the best way to put it. That being said, if I had to put it in a different way, I would say that I think that this Colorado defense is more individually talented than an Oklahoma State defense that somehow completely dumpstered K-State on that day. Stillwater is cursed, man. I don't care what anyone says.
Yeah. I don't think, because of just how the game went, I don't think I ever said it on the recap of that Oklahoma State game, but I was just thinking it today. And despite how that entire game went and the horribleness of it and everything about it, I am still happy that we finally pulled off another win in Stillwater, because of how that just hasn't been a thing that we've been capable of doing in this century, really. So that's as far as I'll take that generosity, though, because like we should have won by a lot more, should have played much better than we did. But at least we won. And sometimes in Stillwater, even if Oklahoma State's not that good, you got to take what you can get. But also shout out to them on their new head coach as well that they have for next year. North Texas's Eric Morris. I wanted to say Eric Morris, but I was hesitating because to me that sounds like the name of like a Friday Night Lights character. So
I'm just happy it's not Colin Klein, man. That's all I really care about.
The rumor is that it was down to Morris and Klein for them, and I don't know how true that is or not. That's just one thing that I saw on Twitter, and man, Twitter was crazy for that search, because I think probably every name that they interviewed probably got publicized at different times, and all of them were like, there's momentum gathering for so-and-so, and they probably were all to just flush out leaks and the AD, but that ends up being Eric Morris. Glad Klein didn't end up there. On the Klein note, the rumor right now with Mizzou is that they have whatever they call their board of regents, their meeting, and are supposedly putting together and approving a significant contract extension and pay raise for Drinkwitz. So, sorry, buddy. On one hand, your backup team gets more drink. However, they aren't going to be a Klein contender. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Knock on wood. I'm feeling airtime here, man.
Yeah. The point is, I don't think Colorado is very good. They are still talented enough to beat K-State, especially if K-State lets the emotion of the previous week get to them, and they just, sort of sleepwalk through this game. In what I don't expect it to be a sleepy environment. I do know that there is a chance of snow on Saturday, which first off, that actually sent me to Vietnam, and I was 30 years into non-existence when Vietnam was ongoing. I had Vietnam flashbacks when I heard snow game. I don't want to deal with that again. So,
for what it's worth, right now, the high temperature for the day is actually at 9 a.m. It's going to be 45. At kick, it's going to be like 44, 43. So it'll be too warm for snow then, but it is going to cool off throughout the game. But unless we go to like 10 overtimes, and even then it's like Mickey Mouse overtimes nowadays, like we should avoid like genuine snow accumulation. Like we might get like some like winter mix or whatever, but like it's by like 2:30 it's still going to be like 38 degrees, which is like brutal and terrible and sounds like no fun, but probably won't be much in the way of snow accumulation. So should avoid that, hopefully. Knock on wood, fingers crossed. It's not our fault if that happens. I am just reading the Apple weather report.
Yeah, I am projecting K-State to win this game, and I just think that K-State has suddenly had a surge against a much better defense where they were able to run the ball. And it is the same schematic defense with worse, I'm not going to say strictly worse players, though, yeah. but players that don't play together nearly as well as Utah. So I think that K-State is more than capable of having a very good day on the ground. And I think that, I think that'll end up being the deciding factor in this game. There is a universe where this game gets very ugly, and I don't mean that as in it turns into a blowout. I mean that as in neither offense is capable of moving the ball, especially if the Utah game was an apparition, which, God, I hope not.
Yeah, I hope that as well. I'm kind of with you. I do think, though, if this game becomes like a rainy game, which it probably will, I think that really benefits K-State, though, in almost every measurable way. For one, this is not being played on grass. It's on turf, so the Ireland stuff won't be a problem. Also, it's probably not going to snow, so the other Iowa State game in the elements probably won't be an issue. It'll still be cold, but that should benefit running as opposed to throwing. And then, as you mentioned, Colorado runs a similar scheme to Utah, so that should benefit Matt Wells turning the page in his playbook and seeing all the gap runs, and that should play in our favor. Here's to another Joe Jackson 290-yard rushing performance. I would keel over laughing if Joe
Numbers
Jackson,
1 and 2 in the record book for Joe Jackson.
yes, because not only because like that would be funny itself, but that would get Joe Jackson to 1,000 yards rushing on the year, and it would be primarily from the last 2 games of the year. And I just think that would be really humorous, like, is what I'm getting at. Like, I don't really have a lot of other justification for it. I mean, I like Joe Jackson as well, so I guess that's another justification for it. But I don't know. That could be funny. Something to keep an eye on. I think that we could run the ball effectively against this Colorado team, and the weather may demand it. So we'll see.
Yeah. You have any final notes before we sign off? It's a shorter episode just because there's not really as much to say about this Colorado team. And I think a pretty decent part of it is, I don't want to say they've given up. I am not saying that they are putting their heart and soul in every game.
Yeah, because, I mean, yeah, I can't say anything more than that, but I do think we as a fan base badly need a win right now beyond just football. Everything's kind of going bad right now. Granted, volleyball did win like last Wednesday, but they haven't played in a week, and they play the day that this episode releases. The last home game of the year. Should be NCAA tournament locks. I think they're just outside the top 25 of the coaches poll right now. So fingers crossed that they play well there. But I do think the fan base at large really badly needs a win. It's obviously not going to rectify the sins of this year. I guess by sins I mean losing. But regardless, like a comfortable win on senior day with some uplifting performances and a look to the future won't solve all our problems, but at the very least leaves a little bit of a better taste in your mouth. So I'm hoping to see a motivated and ready to go team, because most weeks we're typically able to get a good read on like either they're going to really come out motivated this week or this could be a letdown week. I really don't know what to make of this one, because obviously last week was a huge emotional letdown, but it is senior day and the players have seemingly kind of rallied around Kleiman right now. So there could be some uplift there. So I might see kind of a vibe clash. I'm not sure, but I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, this game's going to be miserable. Just weather-wise. Like, not looking forward from a weather standpoint to standing there. This is why I love snow games. If it's going to be cold and it's going to be unpleasant, it might as well look cool. It might as well be.
It may as well have aura.
Yes, exactly. So, obviously, even though we lost at Iowa State game, I have fond memories of me blocking out the score and otherwise enjoying my time, pretending the game didn't happen. But obviously, it won't be the same situation here because it's just going to be rainy, which
it's going to be rainy and cold.
Rainy and cold, like just snow at that point. Like go all the way, commit to the bit.
Connor influences the water cycle by bullying it to go along with the bit.
They're calling me Mother Nature.
On that note, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're AggievilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I am at ACEdwards00.
I am at Connor Baltzor, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store. Link found in our podcast and Twitter bio. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. For come rain, shine, or anything between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.